exo-exiting upon boxy clogging, cleaning out their dilly whizbits, for adjoining streetward, angering a mass, protesting a plenty, placardobots, shouty-outy outrage, alike all else, enraging at bankery.
Undeniably, all of us, we're witnessing right now unprecedented, darn gone economic turmoil, market mayhem, financial instability. However, rest assuring, as Americansians, we'll endure.
Worldly-wide markets falling out over Lehman Bob fallouts, head-crashing downward desperations. Mega headlining, market whizmos, investico whatsits, stocko dropping, drowning under Lehman Bob aftershocks.
Impactico hitting all sectors, especially wacko wobbling, already uber wobbling banking sector. And maybe all downward together, adjoining economica bottery, ramo randangling, fighting face saving between Ostro Kino, including Chicagoza.
Endangering worldwide into economica abyss. Needing a hole in the head right now for Pulipunka enlisting von Hayek. Uber utter head-crashing irresponsibility, whilst right now publica politica statesmanship, statescraft is called for.
Enraging econs, you, Chicagoza, Kinos, are far more randangling each other than addressing the economy.
Yes, indeedy, as Kino or Chicagoza or desist from silly-willy slamody riding me, snappy-snapping, ever-rubbishing, misinterpreting Austro theory, that a far better recounts Huron than any other economica screwdriver.
Sankers to Bernanke, Wizzo worked well enough, albeit slightly bungo-boobed up right now. Yes, of course, I just wanted to respond to recent criticisms about Chicagoza. With Friedrich atop right now, within the New York Fed. He's making economists look ridiculous.
Superstarring almighty pioneering econo thinkers, Kino versus Hayek versus Milto, for having to endure only one financial crisis is bad enough. But more than one economist wanting to solve it may be just too much. Coming soon in cinemas worldwide.
Well, such a movie won't be gracing the silver screen. Nor anytime soon, more likely never ever at all at any cinema. For maybe. You've already guessed that was a rough mock-up movie trailer, using pre-production conceptualized imagery, previs artwork, for fitfully endeavoring as best intended I can, for somehow extemporizing pre-visualizing what the first part of Zaggle Zooogle sci-fi econo screenplay series, if ever filmed, may sort of roughly look, feel, and sound like if presented as a movie trailer, envisaging ahead vaunting ambitions unlikely never realized, but still worthy trying, liberating descriptive text, dialogue, and my somewhat clunky pre-visualized cyberbot world illustrations. put together leaping off the page.
Yes, Wizzo Bang Bitcoin is worthy banging on about, as we headlong hypo do.
But hypo-hyping what's merely no more than digito digits.
Blundering into Bitcoin, that's what they're doing. Hypo-hyping speculo-bigo, blowing their own bubble.
For Dynamica demonstrating what it may look like if filmed one day. Else, why bother vainglorious heads scratching laborious? After endless redrafting, rewriting to write screenplays, as some of us try to do, as surely their only striving telos indeed endpoint is to be translated into film. For unlike proper books, namely novels relying on words alone, proper self-sufficient pieces of attempted literature, that can at least be an end in itself when published to be read, without necessarily needing further validation by being adapted into a feature film, TV series, or even for the stage. Whereas an unfilmed screenplay, such as this one, alike any other screenplay, is only fulfilled when filmed. But instead of summary cast aside, joining proverbial 99.99% never-mades, least now being published beyond script readers, agents, and producers. For speculative wider finding out, ascertaining if it wins enough readership, if it garners enough expectation popularity or passing interest. Dare chance for taking. If it indicates movie could be made out of it one day, and admittedly would have to sell mega-million copies alike Harry Potter, for persuading anyone any tax-paying anywhere to ever get enthralled about other much conjuring, involving macroeconomics or exploding economic theory, and its clashing competing econo arguments interminably raging ever onward today. For even if flesh and blood politicians, bankers, media, protesters, and competing economists, also known as econs, are now made better looking and sounding more compelling when storyline re-envisaged, recasting them now, robotized for exploring '08 financial crisis, that you, the audience, can no doubt still vividly recall, despite happening well over a decade ago. But you'd still probably prefer the usual sci-fi explosive fare than entertained dare enlightened by their explosive econo arguments amplified in '08. Despite shown more dangerous and worldwide impactful to our everyday livelihoods than Hogwarts wizardry that does not affect us outside the cinema. But having myself got this far for finally finishing the first part, thus worthy trying for finding out if competing economic theory, after banker stroke trader '08 type movies. So now econs indeed economics mayhap awaits explored within movie if enough buy into this screenplay series, however weird it may seem. As meldo marrying science fiction to storyline explore economics is admittedly not common felt conventionally seen, nor ever script written attempted even above wrapped stroke boxed about.
I want to steer markets. I want them set free. There's a booming
to be now proposed made film, turning flesh and blood into robotized sci-fi, and albeit somewhat improbable as a prospect. But then again, not quite as much as too many super supposedly state-of-the-art risk management theory, among other econo assumptions prior to the '08 crisis. That assumed was not supposed to foreseeable happen, but did.
You created the mess we're in, and now you're saying, sorry, trust us. You created CDOs who created credit default swaps that never existed a few years ago. Who was the brilliant person who came and said, let's do credit default swaps?
As we all know, alas, risking us. For dare even plunging, revisiting beyond mere boring garden variety recession, but the Great Depression. For upon such a looming prospect, embroiled exercising, everyone everywhere, worrisome wondering to protesting, remonstrating or verily arguing over whether we'd still have a bank account or any money left in it. Arguably, the worst peacetime worldwide crisis since the ever-fabled depressive 1930s famine millioning. Cueing jobless, penury, homeless, hungry, futureless. And then peacetime ending even worser after everyone began warring with one another from 39 onward. So, after all this preamble, if you're still with me despite all of this ultimo about economics, starring politicas, bankers, media, protesters, and especially vying economists, for having now fessed up, told you up front that this be an unfilmed sci-fi screenplay, now published, available to be read and heard. Dynamica exploring competing, clashing economic theory, involving some of the most important, influential thinkers of the 20th century and their supporters today. Thus, no doubt providing reasons enough to click away, then farewell. But for those of you still here feeling venturesome and intrigued, then keep watching.
Howdy outrage, alike all else, enraging at bankery.
So, now let's best explain the journey through how I've got to that mock-up trailer and the first part of the screenplay series. For such a strange and unlikely thing as this, perhaps needs some explanation in trying elicit some engagement, as even publishing an unfilmed screenplay, let alone about economics, will not sell itself, if at all, but least hereon I best try and talk about it. So here goes. So, from the beginning, casting aside any mention of any humo-mechanica robotized world, to now starting off with our everyday, ordinary flesh and blood human being environ that we all know, where most of us can still ruefully recollect what occurred during 2008 financial crisis, indeed subprime banking crisis worldwide. That near enough began emanating from America, falling out, exploding, spreading worldwider, benighting in Europe and Asia, involving faming traders, insurers, mortgage providers, in cahoots with bungling bankery, who modeled the loanable risk away to lend forth profitable housey boom upward, until found afar from it when the subprime risk returned to bust them, or needing bailing out by the GUVO, also known as the government. Understandably annoying governing heads and politicas, indeed politicians, but even more outraging tax-paying voters ultimately having to pay for it, angered enough even to protest occupying against capitalism. Inflaming, fanned by media, reporting apace, let alone between covering vying econs wrangling, about how best GUVO should tackle the crisis according to their competing econo positions, or indeed from their invariably diametric schools of vaunting economic thought. So, from politicians, bankers, protesters, and especially econs, all in comprising these character groups within cast list, befalling various unfurling events upon them and having to somehow respond to during the 2008 crisis. Epicentering in America, thus storylined, so, emanating financial banking crisis, spreading outward, infecting worldwide, being how I see it and wrote it from, where from near enough eventfully began with Bear Stearns, then Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, then Lehman, then AIG, and then TARP, accumulating, comprising some of the main events of 2008 crisis-riven America, sequencing extraordinary knock-on events of what happened, ultimately forming the plot, making up the salient spine of the saga, guideline fleshed out into escalating storyline, holistically befalling the characters into arguing, being somehow affected by the ongoing escalating events of the economic crisis, primal, maximal, aggro, explicating, exploring the overall theme, as what the story is about, being economics impacting everyone, shown at least how important it is. When its fable, old dismal subject suffers a crisis that we all get to see and participate, as unlike any other social science. For a crisis in psychology nobody cares about. And anthropology, nobody knows about. But a full-blown crisis in economics means we all get to join in. A far and above mere academic spat, when much of econo theory is found amiss, affecting everyone, endangering livelihoods everywhere, as discussed in the story. Anyhow, in getting back to the main plotted events forming the story, starting with Bear Stearns. Having profited aplenty running up to '08 in subprime lending, until housing prices collapsed, backwashing onto them, found over-leveraged, overexposed, needing Guvo central banker Bernanke underwrote, enabling them to be bought by J.P. Morgan.
Panic selling has brought Bear Stearns, an investment bank, to its knees. J.P. Morgan Chase buys the firm, but only after the government loans $30 billion to buy up Bear's most toxic assets.
The Federal Reserve has moved quickly to bring order to the financial markets. Secretary Paulson is supportive of that action.
But despite having Guvo shotgun marrying Bear Stearns into J.P. Morgan, the underlying subprime problem benighting the banks among other institutions notably resurfaced. When, despite having Guvo Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson persuading Congress fund him $200 billion to assure markets not to dump indeed bankrupt secondary mortgage providers Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Hank Paulson is still impelled to spend and to take them back into Guvo ownership.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are so large and so interwoven in our financial system that a failure of either of them would cause great turmoil in the financial markets.
But when the crisis moves on to befall another Wall Street investment bank, Lehman Brothers, the Treasury Secretary, after failing to privately rescue them, lets them go bust, rather than have his Guvo office bail them out.
The American financial system is rocked to its foundation as top Wall Street institutions topple under a mountain of debt.
When you step back for just a moment, consider the events of the last few days. It is truly unbelievable.
Yeah, see right
Why did you agree to support the bailout of Bear Stearns but not Lehman?
Yeah, the situation in March and the situation and the facts around Bear Stearns were very, very different to the situation we are looking at here in September. And I never once considered that it was appropriate to put taxpayer money on the line in resolving Lehman Brothers.
But when crisis marred AIG, he through Guvo resumed interventionary bailout strategy by buying into the insurance giant being felt too big to be allowed go bust that could risk everyone into revisiting the Great Depression, as the fallouts over Lehman bankruptcy were felt bad enough, let alone what may happen with AIG being tenfold bigger.
AIG, the situation kept worsening. When we got told that they weren't going to make it through the day, the needed balloon, so it was $85 billion. Imagine that.
Fed can lend against collateral. And we essentially decided that even though the loan to AIG would be very large, that there was enough value in all these insurance companies that we could take it as collateral.
And despite his fiscal firefighting allying central banker Bernanke monetary interventions, the worsening crisis impels Guvo through Paulson, persuading Congress fund him $700 billion. For intending to finally bail out, recapitalize, buy into the banking system, eventually enabling the banks felt confident enough to resume lending outward, thus beginning unfreezing the credit crunch marring the financial system to be at least finally more stabilized. So, within this event, Riven plotted nutshell is what happened. Thus, storylined involving mortgagers, insurers, and bungling banks, having to be addressed by politicas. Guvo Fiscal Treasury Secretary Hank Paulson and Guvo Monetary Central Bankery Ben Bernanke allying Tim Geithner, all uncovered by media reporters, interviewers, and news anchors, all in characterizing the storyline. With the three Guvo big hitters under President George Bush, that barring Lehman being free market allowed to laissez-faire go bust, but the remaining events of Bear Stearns, Fannie Mae Freddie Mac, AIG, and the remaining bungling bankers through TARP were ultimately addressed by less or more of fiscal and monetary Guvo intervention, via Guvo pursuing managed market econo prescriptions, proactive and preemptive, justifying however publica politica, unpopular, unprecedented, and controversial. As the Guvo alike Guvos world over felt had to intervene in the market, in order to avert the crisis away from risking everyone revisiting Great Depression, so-called Armageddon, but by preemptive doing so, offending the freer market econo ethic, tending to arguing that having Guvos too much invoking 1930s may have been somewhat over-egged during hue and cry crisis clamors, excusing to enabling Guvos fiscal, monetary, and regulatory bigging themselves up too much, being never fully reduced during fairer times, enough to soon forget what we once enjoyed under freer market outcomes, so say free marketers, against the more managed market advocates justifying greater Guvo oversight and involvement in the market. Ergo, managed market ethos, justifying greater fiscal monetary intervention and regulation of the market, as opposed to freer market ethos, preferring greater fiscal monetary and regulatory laissez-faire market-driven outcomes, which sounds like an argument needing some other characters to explore in the storyline. Indeed, having so far only bankers, politicians, and Guvo officers talked about characterized mentioned in the story, having glaringly left out economists until now. Most notably, and you may not even need be an econ to recognize the three almighty econo stars now brought back to light, for vivid ventilating their conflicting tit-for-tat interminable, clashing yet cogent fiery aggro. Ultimo combustible firing driving the econo tripartite reciprocal engine for exploring economics. Through the unfurling events endeavoring entertain dare, even enlighten you the audience enough to choose who you economically prefer between them, rather than having the story tell you who be more right or wrong. As the story tries presenting their competing, compelling, and opposing points of view, but hopefully leaves or invites you decide how best we should economically go forward into the future. Now, admittedly, sounding somewhat aspiring, highfalutin idealistic for a sci-fi script-cum film, for awaiting one-day popcorn-munching theater-going consumption. But then again, rest assured can still passive watch to be entertained without impelled to have an opinion. Yet still the story gives you the opportunity, in at least trying elicit their mental, indeed even your very participation, in trying to make you think about the economic choices on offer, rather than having you imbibing the standard sci-fi movie fare. All too often, Unifit aspiring to downward mining securing lower common denominator amass easy fit expectations, whereas now, through chancing aspiring pursuing upward, higher denominator rubric, in this case economics, challenging or inviting you the audience choose between Keynes heading Keynesianism school of mainstream managed market thought versus Milton fronting mainstream Chicago free market school versus Hayek fronting Austrians, the smaller alternative school of free market thought, where from these three long-standing opposing schools of economic thought and considerable intellectual tradition can be deployed colliding together to econo-aggro, argue, explicate, nor mere 08, but much of 20th century econo discourse and how we got to 08, and moreover to less or more degree of influence, have almost even shaped how much of the world economically works today, that we all economically participate in. Okay, I know. Heady stuff for any film, let alone for overturning or at least testing the usual sci-fi norms that audiences expect today. But for now, if you're still with me, let's stay within flesh and blood terms. For still talking about the story, where almighty Keynes, Milton, and Hayek are brought back to life as characters in '08, headlong thrown in for befalling the storyline events, and having to respond to them by mostly arguing through their theory between each other over how best Guvo should tackle the crisis, through dynamic argument thematically explicating ventilating economics. And although Milton is included, he is not given equal footing in the first part of the series, unlike Keynes versus Hayek that, for simplicity's sake, we'll more focus here on. With Keynes arguing monetary and especially fiscal intervention to bailing out financial system, allying more regulatory oversight, thus justifying greater role for Guvo to intercede within the market economy, advocating Guvo's best prudent act rather than stand by dare gamble on do-nothing laissez-faire Hayekian advice, arguably shown too damaging notably after Hayek agreed Paulson in letting Lehman go bust, allowing the crisis to worsen too much, according to Keynes. Whereas Hayek is against monetary and fiscal interventionary bailouts, arguing merely postpones the bust that should allow the market to correct itself without Guvo jumping in to enlarge itself with greater power/authority, ultimo taken from a mass econo liberty, being not allowed to choose when Guvo does it too much on their behalf. And moreover, regarding subprime shenanigans, he argues mainly affect Wall Street investment bankery, so ought allowed go bust that would not systemically bring down majority banking in America, as Wall Street bankery has little to do with the general saving and payment system. But he agrees with Paulson that Guvo had to take in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, being GSE government-sponsored enterprises, ergo the government ultimately owned being liable for the fiasco. Thus, in this case, should have been properly regulated. And regarding who be overall more blameworthy, Hayek blames Guvo/central bankery prior '08 for low rating, easy money fueling booming housing banking bubble until exploding in '08, whilst Keynes may in part agree that central bankery kept rates too low for too long, but far more blames the regulatory Milto-Hayekian mantras from '80s on, enabling bankery freed up acting ever more recklessly, found ruinous in '08. That thanks to Guvo pursuing unfettered free market mantras, he is having to thanklessly address, and even opining if they get through the crisis. Guvo should then nudge a mass to enjoy better life agenda in more health, harmony, friendship, etc., against having Guvos too much measuring everything through the rubric of economic growth. For although disdaining much of capitalism that made us overall materially richer through 20th century, he concedes especially in '08 is needed to re-engage capitalism through Guvo intervention, pursuing monetarily then fiscal direct buy-ins, recapitalizing banking into resuming lending outward, for everyone to spendo helping stimulating the economy back upward, away from crisis. And in furtherance to markets, he argues, are prone to fail. Thus advocates greater regulatory oversight, rather than deregulatory free market self-policing itself via Milto-Hayekian unfettered agendas that Guvos pursued from '80s onward, which he argues merely allowed unleashing bankery into acting ever more recklessly summiting in '08 stupidity, that Guvos must now belatedly regulatory address their deregulatory mistakes. Whilst Hayek argues before '08 banks, including house buyers, were only enabled to act recklessly, from money made too cheap, easy, and available, thanks to central bankery low-rating money. For if the free market decided the rates, they would have been higher, hence avoiding the boom to bust retorts Hayek. And albeit very much more could be said, that be the salient core of their clashing argument in the story ventilated against each other, and embroiling politicians having to decide what best do about the banks, annoying the public, even protesting, all encaptured by media. In the first drafts I textbook read up, for formulating Keynes, Hayek, and Milton characters, but soon began building them up further on drawing influence from their like-minded Keynesian, Austrian, and Chicagoan supporters in what they would kind of say in response to the various unfurling events, such as taking from some of David Stockman's sharpest, best, and funniest lines and arguments for animating Hayek, and from Peter Schiff and myriad other Austros, and likewise for Keynes, some of Krugman, Skidelsky, and other Keynesians are respoken, embellished by Keynes, for having such well-spoken commentators, those of opinion, influencing my less assured self, the lay author, to write Keynes and Hayek aggro more vivid, colorful, and entertaining. And so much so, especially in the abridged and unabridged, in nor just informing what Keynes and Hayek would say, but I increasingly began including these lithe and seemingly ubiquitous supporters in the cast, under ever more drafts, adding more of them in, as supporting characters for either Keynes, Hayek, or Milton, being not alone, but kind of figurehead fronting, almost shepherding their respective econo tribes in the story. Invariably fractious schools of supportive gangs of economic deep-held thought tradition and argument. For by evermore including these striking, contemporary lithe econo impassion-driven characters as themselves, participating within story, thus helping, hopefully adding wider and greater depth opinion, viewpoints, agendas, speaking styles, variety, personality, and contemporary authenticity to the story, than a far rather solely rely on resurrecting Keynes, Hayek, and Milton alive, to entirely aggro-explicate their econo arguments on their own, in perhaps risking being too monotonous and strangely unrealistic without their supporters. Hence, I increasingly felt best to include them, by and large, mostly econs, or often, in other words, biographers, fellowships, professors, Nobel laureates, Politica supporters or hangers-on, podcasters, investors, lawyers, musicas, and even the odd stand-up comic, all thrown in. Loquacious, vivid, adding variety, color, verve, and opinion. Having something to say, storylined, relevant. Well, that's the idea for including them. Hopefully helping making econo arguments feel more real by casting contemporary econo supporters, along with better-known politicians and gouvo officers, and of course, including well-known media, reporters, news anchors, commentators, whatever, and also by including especially supportive econs, many of whom help ventilate various econo topics, arguments, or specialisms, whatever, such as decentralized, stroke-free banking, more equality versus inequality, sound money versus fiat money, post-Keynesians versus neo-Keynesians, EMT, REH, generalized liberalism versus libertarianism, big O Gouvo versus less Gouvo, blah blah. Storyline, even able to argue among themselves without relying on Hayek or Keynes, and even including Bitcoiners' discourse, backdated, included within 08 storyline, as I felt it important enough after nowadays noticing endless Bitcoin podcasting advocacy. Deserving storyline integrated for one of the so-called third Revo Austro options, for answering stroke remedying the excessive fiat monetary manipulation that blameworthy boom to bust us according to Austros. And regards to all of them. although periphery characters to more or less degree compared to Keynes, Hayek, Paulson, or Bernanke, but are still interesting, articulate, lithe, and impassioned, for whether right or wrong. Having something to say, indeed argue about, thus ventilating economics as what the story is about, or else I would not have wrote them in. For upon researching, Googling Keynes, Hayek, and Milton, these names kept popping up, evidently putting themselves out there, whether podcasting, turbo tweeting, article, book writing, lecturing, theorizing, proselytizing, confro communing, large website building. You know, having not cast any innocent econ preferring remaining within classroom teaching, whereas whoever casts strives influencing wider, head above parapet, putting themselves out there. Nor suggesting anything wrong with that, moreover influenced me, thus felt worthwhile including them within story, along with the proverbial media. Familiar reporters, interviewers, news anchors, being mostly unnamed, but later on will be identified, characterized in the story if ever filmed, joining everyone else included in the cast, faming bankers, politicas, all in hopefully helping making the story come film a far more contemporary, connective, valid, and relevant toward audiences. As, bar a few, I have not made them up or invented their econo discourse and disputation, being already out there but merely repacked, ventilated within script, made film perhaps one day or maybe not, lassoing those into the story, having felt relevant to abetting the overall story, whether Guvo stroke politicas, media, bankery, and chiefly Keynes, Ostros, and Chicago econo stroke hangers-on, proselytizing their point of view in some way. For having, not for want of a better word, picked upon stroke, cast any econ or anyone, preferring a quiet life of blameless daily self-reflection stroke teaching, without wanting to do one or more book article writing, lecturing, influential theorizing, podcasting, tweeting, or conference speaking, blah blah. Thus felt them worthy filmed one day. Hopefully taking some comfort that I felt them important enough to be included. And regardless of whether I disagree or agree with them, I have gradually come, as I'm not an econ nor studied it, but through the writing process having come to greater respect their intellect, impassioned fervor, especially with econs. For aside having to oppose each other and trying to fathom how the economy works as they think it should, they have to invariably treat with the tawdry political process in order to get somewhere, which deserves some sympathy, but that is how it is and discussed in the story among other things. And although after 2008 crisis, econs and their subject deserve much ridicule, they are often still able to articulate the various choices on offer more cogently than short-sighted politicians, as at least econs, indeed economists, economically, or attempt to think things through, whether right or wrong in their prescriptions, are surely worthy wider explored stroke projected, hopefully deserving filmed about as the extraordinary ongoing economy matters affecting us all in some way. So, having sketched out the event-riven story befalling the characters' allying theme, let's now put it all together, except this time beyond our proverbial flesh and blood everyday environment, when now human beings are translated into a more dynamic, freewheeling, irreverent, multi-metal melting pot forged humo-mechanica world, making flesh and blood a far better looking, more eye-catching, compelling, and sounding better. But their economics, although exaggerated and the event's storyline finessed where needed, the actual broad economic arguments should remain close enough to resonate in our world. Sold back into us despite being robotized, but still everyday relevant to you tax-paying audience to be entertained, dare enlightened enough to have an opinion, or be engaged with it than what most other sci-fi fare tends to demand of its audience. So, here goes again, but this time via sci-fi starring some of the scripted characters now robotized responding to the events in the story. Ensuing Keynes versus Hayek aggro among bankers, and governing monetary and fiscal and regulatory arguments, all uncovered by media.
So, despite the bushy whirly admino, umpteenth insistico insisting afar before now, that Zippo zero, no taxpayer dollars should be spent for bailing out banker bungling, Wally Wismo finance industry, yet right now, impelling Guvo, welfaring, Wally Walletary. For surely, is that naughty not what you've done, bailing out bankrolling JP Morganza 30 billion, for taking over Sternico, for $10 shares.
Well, Fundafloxing, a new company, enabling Morganza, taking over Sternico.
A loan, a bailout, a guarantee, taxpayers' cash, is Uber Ultimo behind it. Merely Cali calling it what it is, a bailout.
Giving in. To Hue an Kreis. From Millie Boat for Close Ures. Bankrupting. Bilder Bob's Brokers. Mortgage Sally Floggears. Now. Evermore Infecticos. Backwash Bantangling. Wally Wallet Bankery Interbockling World Wide Air. As Hurly Whirly. Wisbank predicted now reality. Inaugurating Wally Wismos. Slamo Wobbly. Slamo starting. First off. Goin Explodai Blobs. Berstanico. After Pulipunker jumps in. Adjoining. The newfangled bailout Botry. Gartner. Bernanke Bob. Super succumbing. Appeasing majority media. Market hissy fits. Or glassware. For imbibing kino interventions. Perpetuating his elixirs. Macroeconomica counter-cyclico. Mega mendacity. Justifloxing. The Guvo bailout gizmo. Mega mechanizing Pulipunker intervening. As if he didn't have a choice. For mega boat Uber orchestrating. 30 billion bailout. Assuming. Stanico liabilities. Being too big to fail. Despite having nothing to do with general payment system. That Pulipunker like Bernanke. Ignores.
Right now, resuming the verily venerable Professor Keynes clog becoming more favored, over what Guvo politicas should do. Revolving him revving relishing, in renewed relevance.
Upon such ignominious happenings, need not have happened, if my regulatory advice had been adopted, for alas, now having to after the proverbial horse, having electro-bolted blazing off, once again, leaving me, picky-boo picking up the pieces, for Fixico fettling making amends, unlike Hayek, leaving the market remaining broken, Levo left, laces left unhindered, endangering, even greater chaos.
Feely felt, now further impelled, for defendo defending, defend of loxing the Bear Sternico bailout, against free-marketed, meso Hayekian Ostro angers.
Dem Blastica Diabolica, having Henki to Bernanke, bailing into Mr. K, via bailing out, Stanico Banker Flop Peri.
I'd like to comment, if I may, refuting hurly-wordy, albeit predictable Ostro accusations, that we bailed out Bear Sternico, as the company itself did not fare very well. Losaflopping, independence, employees, shareholder value, that no company would willingly want to endure. For what, having in mind, and why we had to act, Preventico prevented Sternico bankruptcy from chaotic unwinding, causaflopping, too much, Investico damage and market fallouts, falling out upon everyday wider.
So, you feely felt you needed to, having no choice, but intervene.
Havo having the courage to act, having acted as we did, for Protectico protecting the financial system from Infectico worsening the wider economy. Never for welfaring Wally Wallet Wismos, or wider bankery, but super simply having a do what was needed for Protectico all else, that's all. As be my duty bound, veer Federal Reserve to do so. For if the everyday, ball-bearing, cyber-bot citizen were to electro-twig, understand why myself and others, having acted for their everyday benefit, Then maybe one day, becoming reconciled, for thanking us, or else, witness worse enough to be avoided. Thus, we've had to do what we had to.
Precisely, stealing, the very words, from my mouth, nor put any better, beating, even atop, my silver tongue.
Nor Kino, nor glassware, bailing out, Wally voluntary bankerflopperi, against free market reckoned, wisso bang, market luxing without taxico taxpayers bailing out, rewarding floppy failure.
Whilst Hurley wordy, Austriansian accusations, hearing him, out yonder skyward, Hurley hectoring, Hurley wording me, through Mizo-Hakian, Austral lunacy, as ever, being unwarranted, beyond damn blastical irresponsibility, to clinical insanity. For acting, as we did, attemptico, preventing further instability, against spready woody forth, from diabolical already worsening, financial system entirety, and may I say, all those said before, being worthwhile, for saying again, a hearty well done, to Tim O. Gardner, and also, for Hanky Pulipenka, the Treasury Secretary, for marrying Morganza into Sternico, intervening forth, however hated, but needed, so needs must. As Uberal Timo, however unseemly, Hanky Pulipenka did the right thing, empowered, within Treasury, allying Timo Gardner, New Yorkie Fed, enrolling what was needed, wiso whizzing his wherewithal, nor merely, amongst other ball bearings, whirling the world, however now, made safer, being extra guvo gizmo that Hanky can, empowered, ready placed, for diving in, making a difference, as prudent to do.
Yes, well, evidently, many mistakes having arisen. Thus, await redressing, away from worsening.
And maybe, taking hearty solace, vice centro chebet, right beside me, being Uber scholar of the great Wally Wallop, crasher for being 29, being bad enough, then slammo onward, depressing 30s.
Yes, double naughty heady. For way back then, mistakes were made, for now learned enough, for naughty not be repeated.
Indeed, having Benny, being super spanner, revving ready placed to preventico, away from repeatico, repeating history 2.0.
Dem blastica Henki or Bernanke, bailing into Kino for bailing out Stanico that better best left go. For nowhere nearing, Greco risking great depresso.
For way back therein, I was there, first time round, nor wishing revisiting, for Guvo redoing Vera do nothing him, enough already being heard, without heeded.
Aha, indeedy. Rerunning, the worldy-wide Great Depression, uber-duber, should be avoided at all cost, as already, the Federal Reserve, is swirly whirling this time round, being overhead, on top of it, for swooping jumping in for doing what's needed, for uppy, upholding the integrity, stability, of the Americansian economy, protecting, upholding bankery, within financial system, provided, with extra liquidity, already made available, atop already, reducing federal fund interest rate, and maybe furthermore, rate reductions if needy be.
Ensnaring half of 12 trillion Americansian mortgage market, much of which exposes them susceptible to ongoing downgoing subprime shakeouts. Having losaflopped so much mega devalued in today's trading, amid mounting subprime fallout mortgage liability exposure. Undoubtedly, worry-wondering market speculo, vexo ventilating escalating headlines, Kizo questioning whether they have the capital to cope, for cushioning the collapse in the housing market. For without Franklin Freddie, housing market mortgage magnitudes, the modern-day Americansian economy, so say experts so nozos, would mega malfunction, render rotting, too much everyday economica damage, reco risking another Great Depression. Franklin Freddie, aside preoccupying bushy-whirly admino, but embroiling his successors Obamabot or Makino over what they would do if having to deal with it.
Simmer seething, the top of green, naughty heady, feely felt, feely feeling, head along, hoppy, hoppity angry, like everyday Main Street, anger boggling, Wally Wallet Street, latest lunacy, after Bear Stearns, now doubling up on Frankie. However, doing aside, damn Yankee wrangling Zaggle Zoogling. You know, for if it was to let go, the everyday, economica ramifications are horrido huge. Economica desperations, Great Depression, 2.0 according, oh so many, oh no so's, as does, oh so very venerable, Professor Keen Escalok, who may indeed needy heating even more.
Afterward, after this crisis, whoever wins this proceedal election, whether Obama or myself, Uber urgently must amend the regular laxity, overhauling financial frameworks, already costs a flopping enough bandangling. Then afterwards, ought legislate in place against ever happening again, never oh never, waits repeating being too much here on as it already is.
Ignoring campaigning platitudes atop public outrage. The Treasury Secretary persuaded Congress today. War chesting him mega billions. That may yet await Frankel and Freddie rescue.
So, cometh here, beggy weggy, cap in hand, impelling urgently wanting us, money you up 200 billion, even though, you assure us you're naughty not, planning to spend it. Aha. So, why upon why? Bonkers bother, asking for it, or are you, super simply, just raving bonkers? But, knowing market know-hows, by me, being Mr. Market Mega Market know-how, for that I am, for uber duber, mega making super duper perfect sense. For if the markets know that I, having a bazooka in my pocket, big enough for standing by, they should calm down so I won't be needed to fire it off. Spendo spewing billion-dollar backstops. Being big enough as it is, as a statement, simply needing the authority, but not used, not spent upon, gunpowder, kept dry, empowering the Treasury without usage. Ergo, odd enough in itself for super smoothing calming down Frankel bondholders, away from not downward dumping them.
Slammo banging. Breaking news. For despite being moneyed up over 6 weeks ago in powder dry, the already much put upon Treasury Secretary was force-a-flopped today into firing off his bazooka.
Smashy blasting mega news. The government is taking over Franklin Freddie, taken back into conservatorship, as well as Sacco replacing the reckless management found abysmal, and standing behind their loans, debts, all their liabilities, atop having to take it back, costafloxing 200 billion, taxpaying dollars, already hopping angry alike Congressa.
So, pray telly well, Mr. Super supposedly, whizzo bang Mr. Mega Market know-how. For what the helly well happened with powder dry? You know, right now, upon already. These past weeks, right now. I'm having a bad day. Right now. You could indeedy say that. For what the helly well happened about keeping your bazooka in your pocket, instead of spendo spewing, trigger totaling 200 billion of our damn blastical money. Deficit deepening, diabolica even deeper.
Hanky Pullipunker, yet again, Mr. Bailout by Bazooka Bulletin, 200 taxpayer bo 3 billions. For alas, forceflopped into, by Guvo guarantee, which guaranteed upward, dem stupidico lendo behavior, under laxo losening, lendo criteria, as Frankela Freddy, publica private hybrid, managed amiscon reckless, no matter whoever, wanting subprime mortgaging, as uber ultimo, via guarantee, the taxpayer had no choice. For halfway on the hook, is still on the hook, unspoken, government guarantees, what reckless management then horrido spoken for. So odd, never have them, or else guaranteeing self-fulfillment, at everybody's expense, billioning billing, enrolling ball-bearings everyday taxpayers, having now, to pay the price, of GSE stupidity.
Alas, Frankel and Freddie debacles was corsiflopped, for lack of oversight, nor mere, regular laxity were never within it. Ludicrous, arm's length. GSC quagmires, quasi-quarantining them, from publica politica scrutiny. That super surely, such, idiotic fence ringing needed collapsing for public oversight. But alas, electro horses, having yet again a top long ago already bolted, necessitating 200 billion for lassoing, brought back, for now waiting relevant regulo, proper, publica politica guvo oversight, amongst many other, re-regulatory measures, and furthermore, Hanky Pulipunka having to redo the deregulation, that he Wismo won, when heady wedding goal but heavy sacks, lobby locked away, leverage limits in 04, into now, backwash befalling Wally Bankery, Wismo risking self-destruction, after Sternico, and now bedeviling marring the manbob. Ludicrously, over-leveraged 40-1, with no doubt heavy sacks close behind. For if, kept at 12-1, they wouldn't be wherein today, more wobbly than whiz-bang Wismo. For alas, in 04, I fought against but low-C flopped, but now, Pulipunka's legacy befalls him blameworthy. Beyond, eating his words, whilst now, he's having to enact against them. Thus, he's having to, edging perchance escalating, moving towards me away from Hayek.
Layman Bob, Horrido Horrendous Mega Market Investigo Exodus, Run Downy Run Free falling them all week long, Dire Diabolica decimating already Downy stock, declining desperate, Mega befalling, to now share trading today, Horrido hemorrhaging, at some point, up to $8 million per minute, Wama weakening rot wretched Mega Impactico to imperiling, Layman Bob's very viability, over whether it can survive. This mega massive market onslaught. Right now downing them, slow-mo going only one way.
Closing Diabolica Friday today. Awaits Monday market bankruptcy, which Pulipunkers attemptico averting, before the weekend's up, via verily inviting Wally Bankery, to rescue Layman Bob privately, without Taxico taxing the taxpayer. And aside Bankery, Pulipunker Uber Duber daringly has invited upward, for adjoining them, with the mega pro-market thinker, Professor von Hayek, for crystallizing clarities, reminding them, that their funds await Layman Bob without public funding.
Speaking up, for everybody, Uber Duber Amit our entirely focused on marrying B of I with Lehman Bob. Thus, Preventico, Taxico taxpayer interventions, via super whirling giving a whirl, to Austro-Austriansian economica solution solving.
Levo leaving once outside, adjoining inside Wino winningly, enabling himself, being seen useful exploiting upward his Austro foothold, is undoubtedly, verily vexing worrying aloud, his arch-rival.
Of course, regarding the manbob, taming private solutions before public provision, is of course, entirely preferable. Attemptico protectico taxpayer bottery, from bailing out Wally Wismo excess if at all possible. However, for Pulipunka, publica pronouncing on the outset, that no publica assistance is available, is to my mind somewhat limiting, lactivating, dynamism, statescraft, and above all, economica foresight, self-denying, other solutions, that ultimo may be needed, yet now, having Pulipunka, narrow-minded politica posturing for appeasing a mass, hue and cry hubbubs, for despite redo reddening, more publica opprobrium, one may have two for the greater good, enabling checks to be paid in, and cash machines still working, the world over, or else, near likely as not, unleashing economica mayhem, if letting the manbob go bankrupt, as already understood by salvaging Franco, and maybe ultimo, awaiting likewise, using taxpayer bottery than let go, for Pulipunka, teetering atop a tightrope amid the 11th hour, wrestling, Herido decisions, having Ramo ramifications worldwide, every day in every way, everyday economical livelihoods at stake, enrolling, everyday ball bearings awaiting futures. So best not, be limited on the outset, being boxed up cornered into dogmas, quarastros, von Hayek, Mizzo bottery, Rathbardos, mere cats, thus, better best, remain open to all options, so says Timo Gardner, Benny Bankalob, Osuknosos, condensing my consensus.
I hereby affirm, the rumor milling, media mogs, Market televators, oso-nozos. Armchair onlookers, chatter what Terry whatever. That Lehman Bob brothers did indeed file for bankruptcy at 2 a.m. this morning.
Sadly, it is so, but had to be. Left go.
So, did you?
Uber duber double naughty not, at no point. Echoing, endless repeat echo triple underlined. That no public money was ever tabled up. Wally Wismo banker botery were given Gartner's table to sit around. But tabling their own money for attempt echo rescuing Lehman Bob. Spincoza. B of A, then Barclay Clog. We tried, triple tried. But ultimo failed to close out Super Seal. Screw down a deal. No doubt, other botery. Politicabots, media mogs, chatty with Terry Oso-nozos. Armchair opinioning. Damn Yankee yabbering. Economica botery bruhalerers. Ramo ramdangling. Keensclogians. Over here and him afar. Differboggling otherwise. Over what else could have been done. But it was done this way. Scoring lines. In silver sand. If not now, then pray when do we not cross them?
So, as of now, worldwide biggest bankruptcy. Do you not think, after bailing out Sternico, Frankel, so why not Lehman Bob?
That was then. And this is now. Here on. Being entirely different. Different situation. Deserving. Different solutions. Swapafloxing publica, for private, and all said, was closing in, but, however close. Private talks fell through. We just couldn't do the deal.
Sternico, over-leveraged, mega-indebted, over-borrowed, for booyo-binging subprimes as of Lehman Bob, so. Where's the difference? So why treat it so? Are you naughty not? Choppy changing treasury policy.
No.
Ad hoc, on the hoof, messaging markets one way, and then the other. Giving, mix-a-floxing messages. Choppy changing, vacio-higalating. Are you not?
Hanky pull pumper. No more bailouts. Diabolical welfare. Wally welfares.
Listen, them outside. Shouty out. Occuflocking. Amassing outrage. Revving redder already inflamed. Won't swallow another banking bailout. Despite what Kino thinks and does. Too often. Offending Americanza ethos. For this time, no is no, and nor just agreeing, but I'm acting as they would outside. Nor just saying, but doing it.
But.
For super shoveling. Taxpayer dollars into a bank run never works. Chucking good money after bad. Having nothing behind it, but a bottomless hole. Indebted, way too deep. Uber ultimo. Lehman Bob needed buying, not bailing out.
Yes, indeed, my goody good newfangled friend. As mega massive misallocations, having ultimo wrought my predictico. Befalling, banking industry, held horrido hostage, how sie held bubbled upward, how sie bankers bust, under Kino, Senko, Bernanke, easy monetary credit expansion, now awaiting unwinding, and best unhindered, levo left be, no longer me gailed, above or away from market correction for deciding what wasted and what be taken on. Inducing worldwide recession, however unpopular for cleansing excesses. From investments, found mal, buildy boomed up, now needing the bust, being ultimo now necessary. Reallocating resources, whether land labor capita via free market aegis. Everyday economica, reborn aloft in productico enterprise. Long term upheld if left alone. Without short term, gungle glisten in mendacity. Top down, thanks to managed economica botery usually reside in herein, via guilty flaws below. Having already, them blastica done enough to now do nothing for levo leave go.
Hanky Pullapunka, megabot cyber suicidal stupidity, even making, slamo blastical banker buffoonery, looking good next him. Ubrata, that's quite a feat. Better besting more idiocy than floppyfold. Whoever banker bonkery is Uber triple duber, even for the Treasury Secretary surpassing insanity. Levo letting the man Bob go busty flops, low-C flopping mega billions, banking into bobbled worldwide. As this, a far worse big-o bankruptcy begets another atop another. Herido escalating ongoing downgoing, slamo banging into bobbing herein, and worldwide others, turbo tendangled domino toppling, Waymo worsening everywhere, Harido horrendous, Kiko starting via Limambob, topple clubbing, even more stupidity including herein, RBSO, HSBO, already uber wobbly, without even the manbob fallouts, and sure enough, about to Corsi flop our bandangling, for now no doubt awaiting our taxpayers, after Hanky Pulapunka, Uberata, shucks, his responsibility, Publica Politica Fiduciary Treasury Remit, to protect Americansian economy, ergo, however Harido, against public outrage, but still should have done, what's necessary, rally rescuing, saving the manbob, in 30 or 40, than Harido Losi flopping 600 billion, megabot values, pensions, investicos, whatever wattery, into boggling, beyond damn Yankee, now worldly wider to nigh on trillions. Hijacked into, by the utterly unmentionable, economica car crash of Mizo-Hakian, do-nothing Austro-economics. And now, Harido inflicted upon us all, by doing exactly bugger all, by leaving go Limanbob, Uberata triple underlined, laces fair lunacy.
Albeit sketched out, mostly imperfect, clunky AI voiced, if expressive performed live, vocally acted out properly, it should sound and look more vivid via sci-fi means if everything is brought together, often better demonstrated in our animatic scene series found on this channel. All in, Dynamica Cyberbot selling us economics made entertainment foremost. Or that's the idea anyhow. For it matters a far less, whether boxed or wrapped about, when the nub of their econo arguments still remains the same. From mid-20s to today, through books to rap videos. Almost celebrating the most famous riff between these two economists, fronting their respective econo schools even without needing Milton. Still roundabout fault-lining dividing economics today. Between more interventionary managed market versus freer market laissez-faire prescriptions. Regulation versus a far less or even self-market regulation. Monetary and fiscal activism versus a far less. Short-run versus long-run arguments. Fiat money versus sound money. Centralization of money banking and rates versus decentralization of money banking and rates. Or perhaps having a monetary policy versus not really needing one. Bigger GUVO versus smaller GUVO. Generalized modern liberalism versus libertarianism. Blah blah and very much more arguments, such as in the political realm, or that of the history between them is storyline discussed, and why some econs win out more than others. But best not further discussed here, as may spoil it for anyone brave enough wanting to read or listen to it. Anyhow, by turning it into sci-fi provides essentially three main advantages above the standard 08 movie fare. For first off, most glaringly, thanks to sci-fi, our flesh and blood world is made a far more eye-catching, compelling looking when set within metallized world. Perhaps looking something like this, populated by non-bipedal, humo-mechanica cyberbots, using more sculpted faces as their lips don't move. And when properly worked up should look a far better looking than the rough, somewhat clunky, provisional mock-up cyberbot designs you've been watching, but still giving you some kind of idea of what may sort of look like. And secondly, should sound better, more impactful to listen to, by using robotized inventive language.
Levo letting the manbob go busty flops, low-C flopping megabillions, banking into bobbled worldy wide. As this, a far worse bigo bankruptcy begets another atop another, Harido escalating ongoing downgoing, Slammo banging into bobbing herein, and worldy wide others, turbo tendangled domino toppling, Waymo worsening everywhere, Harido horrendous, Kiko starting via Limambob, topple clubbing, even more stupidity including herein.
Hopefully sounding more vivid in expression, phrase, vocab, words anew, machine eluding, percussive, and persuasive. Hopefully helping their econo-agro warring wording disputation sound good enough for sufficing you, the audience. rather than having to comprehend every econo exactitude in exactly what was meant being argued over. Or, in other words, 'tis less what you say, but how you say it that really counts. Sounding first off good to listen to, and then what they say may come through. And finally, by setting '08 within a different world, enables the events in time and place and a few facts to be arranged, finessed to better abet the character-riven storyline to optimally explore economics, as be the theme. But as though invariably accustomed to general derision without even engaging other economists, their striven, well-intended yoke endeavors to be a serious vocation, as the economy socio-politically matters a mass. Evidently, during 20th century, shown substantive, relevant, and important, serving everyone in some way, affecting livelihoods everywhere. Thus, may even provide sci-fi with something more cogent, indeed everyday resonant, to cinematically explore wider, rather than pursuing the usual easy-fit audience-pleasing tropes. Nor highbound Huron aspiring to suggesting such and such faming actioning warring lasers explosions among ever more effects, does not have a place. But if given opportunity to storyline find a way, sci-fi ought aspire harder, try tackling. For want of better words, more intellectually complicated, difficult, and challenging topics stroke themes, such as economics in this instance. In essence, providing the event's characters and theme, while sci-fi can do most of the rest ensuing, projected, robotized, and world afar. Enabling politicians, protesters, media, and econs need not be flesh and blood to storyline celebrate economics. Or that be my reckoning anyway. Else I wouldn't have sci-fi read it so. And no doubt much more can be talked about and expanded upon, especially on visiting Q&A and from script to film. So I best move on to talk about the screenplay as a publication. Aside the unabridged that is not yet available, the first part of this sci-fi econo screenplay series is available in very short version, an abridged version, and in illustrated and illustrated editions, in ebook, audiobook, and no doubt print in due time. Although loosely obeying screenplay format in slug lines, action stroke descriptive text, character names, parentheticals, and line dialogue, the script is writ long alike, the text often explaining what characters think, feel, and do regarding economic theory. And the text often summarizes scenes at the end, guiding cause and assuring readers what has gone on and what may happen next, using semi-novelistic approach, attempting elicit popular readership, and a far rather cultivated than having me pursuing script to screen strictures. Being functional but discourages general readership more tuned as it is to novels, and compared to such. Very few screenplays, even less so unfilmed ones, have enjoyed popular readership, which is hereon needed, hence textual writ toward them, hopefully helped with accompanying illustrations. The abridged screenplay also enjoys an illustrated summary, explaining it further, and would also suffice those readers who bought the very short version, all in trying to lower the barriers that would hamper any take-up of the screenplay if there be a market for such, but worthy finding out, and helped with this channel providing supportive content best consumed in the following order, starting with Preview. Hello? Re-envisaging economics. Being what you are watching now. Various mock-up movie trailers. Animatic series intro. Various scenes from the audiobook. Various samples from the summary. AI stuff. Q&A. From script to film. Our publications. You know, being as it is, a screenplay nor even filmed but now published, and science fiction but about economics, ordinarily not seen as go-to page-turning material. Thus, one must put stuff out there in utmost attempting to overcome understandable resistance. The screenplay is writ long, assuming novelistic readership patience, sensibility, and approach. But thanks to the story relying on newsfeed footage, enables it to be very easily cut down, sharpened towards serving more on-point filmable ends. Moreover, what some scenes, albeit not cut down, may roughly turn out like if ever filmed can be found on this channel, demonstrating its potential if visualized one day, reminding us that it be a screenplay aspiring to be made rather than mere read. But it can be listened to from its audiobook, inviting readers page flick through, follow, indeed accompany the screenplay, especially suiting the VSV Illustrated Edition. Moreover, various scenes are sampled on this channel, suggesting it may not be so arduous as an experience despite being about economics. But if shown to any producer, it would never, nor other parts, be ever made into econo film series, even if presented more palatable through sci-fi. Never to garner producing stroke funding interest or filmed as writ or allow author direct. Thus, the entire script-to-film process is now being attempted from here on circumvented, through publishing at least the first part of the screenplay, taking the same route as many books do if winning enough readership to be made film. Instigating through initiating almost reverse-engineered bottom-up script-to-film process, rather than top-down arbitrated through gatekeeping studio production, nor always right over how, what, and who be made film. And if filmed, although exaggerating differences between competing econs, it has not been invented, but simply, 8 storyline amplified through sci-fi means, accelerating their warring words of today among each other. Interminable wrangling without resolution in differing about the economy. But may agree worthy filmed about inviting you the audience decide between them, when from century on they cannot agree remaining irreconcilable, especially between almighty Keynes, Hayek, and Milton heading their respective impassioned followers. And exciting this lay author, however imperfectly storyline, trying explore them through their arguments in raging around economics, that matters to us all, mayhap enough buy into this made movie one day or more likely not. But still best find out through asking the market, decide that all managed market or free market econs would agree. And pray check out other content on this channel that you may find more straightforward and appealing than what's shown here. But for now, farewell.